Hello and welcome back to another episode of CamBro Conversations. For today's conversation, the agenda is so wide, and that's because of all the different interests that my guest has. We are joined today by Chelsea Andersen. Chelsea, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
Yes, good and excited to record with you. And like I say, so many different interests, but where should we begin? What would you introduce yourself as, Chelsea? Because you wear so many different hats.
Blimey, yeah. So for those who don't know, I work 9 to 5 in the corporate world as an accountant. So not quite qualified as chartered, 3 exams off being chartered. So alongside working full-time 9 to 5, I'm studying full-time for that chartered qualification. But alongside that, people might know me through Instagram, Chelsea_Fitness UK. And for those who have an Instagram page will know how behind the scenes how much work is put in behind that, and alongside that I'm also a level 3 personal trainer. I guess kind of those are the key areas.
Those are the headlines. the headlines. And yeah, I completely agree that content creation alongside your 9-5 is very heavy. Professional qualifications, I've done some in the insurance space, but I know in the accountancy space it's even more important to have those in order to be chartered and for you to continue to progress. And you've got to a really high level within your firm, but in order to make the next step and kind of get to where Chelsea Andersen wants to be in 3, 5, 10 years time, the empire that we joked about offline before we hit record, there's lots of work to do. So there's so much of a balancing act, isn't there? And I guess when it comes to having a fitness Instagram, you also have to partake in the fitness itself, and that's more time as well. And you're somebody that's got a really varied fitness background. Tell us a little bit around how you kind of have always been into sports and fitness.
I am just naturally competitive. I think having 2 younger sisters, always wanted to win. We're a very much a competitive family and always just driven to be that, you know, the winner and the best and that I can do in whatever sport I'm participating in. For me, obviously, being healthy, and I appreciate health can be defined in many different ways, but for me, I also suffer from juvenile arthritis. And I was diagnosed when I was 7. So at 5 years old, I had to complain to my mum that my elbow was really much hurting, and 2 years it took to be diagnosed with juvenile arthritis. And so being unable to do various different things, I also participated in a hell of a lot of sport growing up as a child, from gymnastics, dancing, swimming to football for 5 years. Always been very heavily involved with sport, but due to this arthritis, there was times where I've been told, you know, you can't do this or you can't do that or you shouldn't do this. And I think whenever you're told you can't do something, you always want to do it more. And it relates also back to that competitiveness. I am still very much competitive and still wanted to do it. So I think all this spirals into one, really, and the fact that I am competitive, health is important to me, and keeping those muscles and joints and stuff moving and strong has meant that fitness and participating in sports has just grown, and it's just grown over me, and that's it.
A huge part of your identity. And I guess being diagnosed at such a young age with quite a serious condition that a lot of people would maybe see as a setback, how did it impact your ability to partake in sports and get involved with the younger kids? It doesn't seem to have, but I'm just interested that what your take on that is.
I guess there was a few key moments. With arthritis, you have up and down periods, and when you go through a really bad flare up, there'll be times when you can't do the simplest things, you know, like brush your hair because your elbows don't bend fully, or your joints and your fingers and things like that, you can't hold certain things. And I just think there were times when flare-ups were so bad that I couldn't really do anything like that. But I guess the real time where I had to give up a sport completely was dancing and gymnastics, because my elbow, for me, the arthritis is strongest and probably the worst in my right elbow. I can't fully straighten it or can't fully bend it. So being in dancing competitions and dancing exams, it just really looks lazy with me not straightening that elbow. So it meant I had to give up those sports, but I never really focus on what I can't do. It's always what I can do. And I you know, thrived on that opportunity to then take up football, of course, which I loved. And I'm sure we'll discuss that at some point as well, because that was a huge part of my life. I find
the fact that the arthritis almost portrayed itself as you being lazy in your presentation and dances in such stark contrast to anything that you and I have spoken about before through Instagram, anything you and I have spoken about in preparation for this podcast. And equally for this kind of opening 5 minutes of us having a discussion just now, the listeners probably wouldn't use that term ever to associate with you. So it's no surprise that you then went, oh, well, I'm maybe being limited in this one particular space, but guess what? I'm going to put my energy and my capabilities into another.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And like I said, dancing was something I was unable to do, but hey, you know, it meant I could bring up football, and I grew to love that. And it's a team sport and make many great friends through that. So yeah, turning a negative into a positive.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
And you and I were laughing before you did a bit of the content creation on LinkedIn, didn't you? And you kind of started to focus a bit of your attention there alongside this popping Instagram of yours. And one of the messages you said, and you've actually already said the phrase already, is focus on what you can do, not what you can't. And I think for anyone listening, how refreshing is it when somebody who maybe shares these quotes, which can sometimes be pretty vacant and lacking in substance on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever you're sharing, how refreshing is it when a content creator actually lives by that motto rather than just posting it for likes?
I mean, I definitely do. I think also probably that people can more relate to is this past year, you know, a lot of control has been taken away from us due to COVID and being in lockdowns and not being able to do certain things. But it's more, you know, rather than complaining about it, moaning about it, being like, okay, you know, what can I actually do? What do I have control of, and focusing on that and growing within those areas as opposed to not, you know, moaning about it.
Yeah, and I think you've certainly done that, and I'm sure we'll touch on that as the episode goes with some of the challenges that you poured yourself into. But you mentioned football there and it becoming a real focus for you. What kind of experience have you had with that over the years?
So I played for 11-a-side team, a women's team in Kent, and I grew to be captain for the remaining 4 years out of the 5 years I was playing for the team. Centre midfielder, scored 16 goals in the last season, just to point that one out. But yeah, it was a sport that I grew to love, and it was a team sport. And I think being a leader and showing, you know, the fitness side, taking those sides on, just grew to love it so much. And obviously that competitive side grew in me for sure.
Yeah, and I think you can see that you got something from being able to work in an environment where you could contribute regardless of what was going on with your elbow, and shrug that aside. But in more recent years, training in the gym has become more of a focus. What do you think led to that?
I'm not exactly sure. I just grew to love weight training. Currently trying Olympic lifting at the moment, which is a whole new story to even begin with. But I just grew to like weight training, and the football phased out partly because of injuries and time, ultimately with everything else going on in my life, that football took a back seat, and weightlifting and training in the gym with friends, etc., kind of grew on me, and that's just what I fell in love with, really.
I think when we think about football training, and I know you were saying to me about time management when we were speaking previously, it's not just the commitment of the 90 minutes on a Sunday, which is when you were playing, it's everything around that. And when you look at the rest of your schedule, you look at the study time needed for these exams and qualifications to move you forward in another area that you care passionately about, which is your career.
I'm a numbers geek and spreadsheet. Love a good spreadsheet. Selling myself out here.
Yeah. So given you've got like this limited amount of time, this limited amount of resource to invest, I suppose weight training is a little bit less of a commitment time-wise than regularly training for football. And then you were probably doing your weight training to some extent alongside the football to make you a peak performer on the pitch.
Yeah, I was attempting. I must admit, it would take, so matches would always be on Sundays, you know, Monday, Tuesday recovery, training Wednesdays, and then preparing myself for the match the following Sunday. So it was full on, and unfortunately just had to take a back seat. Whether I'll be back on the pitch someday, who knows, but for now, sticking to weight training predominantly.
Yeah, and I know from conversations with previous guests who've maybe struggled with a kind of lifelong condition like arthritis, or Talia Bentley spoke about type 1 diabetes, and my friend Evie Chardon spoke about her inflammatory condition. What role does weight training play in actually positively impacting something like that?
I find during a really bad flare-up, obviously movement, especially with arthritis, is the last thing you want to do. So I tend to lean more towards non-weight bearing exercises, so things like, cycling or swimming, etc. But I do focus more on the weight training side of things, just to keep those muscles around the joints strong to support those joints. But ultimately, my doctor did say, find a fine line, don't go too heavy, but just work towards it, but not too much.
I know you joked with your doctor how many of your patients can deadlift 100 kilos, and I think he looked at you in shock.
Yeah, he was a bit surprised. But it's about listening to your body and not pushing it too much, but finding a fine line.
Yeah, and on the subject of speaking about your condition, we've been connected for 3-4 years. Back in the day when you were, what was the title of the page? The 7 a.m. health tip, wasn't it?
Oh, it's the 7 a.m. daily health tip. So people knew I'd be posting at 7 a.m. and that's kind of how I built my platform, really. Just made myself unique, and people knew when I was posting. Yeah, that was that.
I remember it back in the day, but you didn't speak loads and loads about your arthritis, and it seems to me from following your journey that it's been in the last 12 to 18 months that you've been more vocal about it. What do you think drove that willingness to share it more?
I think a couple of things, really. I've always tried to keep my personal life out of Instagram, and I guess with arthritis, I think opening up about it is a reminder, reminding myself that I do have this illness. And I was a bit reluctant on talking about it, but then I kind of hit a stage where, if I can help a couple of people and reassure, a few people that it's not so bad, you can still exercise, you can do various different things, then, great, day made. And I guess really another key area was the start of COVID. So March 2020, I experienced a really, really bad flare up again, to the point where I remember sitting at dinner with friends and I just couldn't get the fork to my mouth. And it was the pain associated with that that meant, going through a bad flare up. And I'm sure we'll speak about it in a second, but also leaning the bad flare up meant that I went on to very strong medication, and that was mild chemo. I don't even know where to begin with that. That was a whole 6 months that drained me completely, to say the least. But I think all those factors meant, that I'd like to share it, and it was a time for me to share it as well.
I can imagine that helps a lot of people who either suffer from the exact same condition of arthritis, and there's such a common misconception that arthritis is only prevalent in the elderly or the kind of older population.
Massively.
And that must grind your gears. And again, to refer back to speaking to Talia, she was saying about people confusing type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and it driving her absolutely mad because one is a genetic hereditary condition while the other is like very much something that's almost caused by behavioral and kind of habitual. So for you to be like grouped in with, that's only for old people who suffer with like arthritis in their wrists or their knees or whatever, and you're thinking, well, no, at the age of 7 I was diagnosed with juvenile arthritis.
Yeah, I mean, it is often the case. They are quite surprised at being so young. I do suffer from arthritis, but that's just, lack of knowledge, and arthritis is more associated to the elderly. But I think people are getting more aware that it can be sort of at any age that anyone can generate arthritis.
Yeah, and I think your willingness to share it will definitely help people, but I think everyone can relate to the struggle. And I know that I often seek out content of people who overcome struggle, and it can be on any sliding scale. So you can have the extremes of maybe looking at male mental health where somebody was challenged to the extent that they maybe tried to take their own life and then they came back from that, and you can take inspiration from it. Equally, you can maybe look at somebody on a much smaller scale who maybe lost their job and overcame that and moved on to greatness or moved on to a career that they were happier in. And I think we can all take this sliding scale of inspiration, or at least understanding of other situations and how people were resilient around those. So for you to share that with the public, with the platform that you've built over the years, is something I think a lot of people would probably be quite thankful for you doing.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I never regret anything in life. I am never unthankful for whatever happens, and arthritis certainly has had its I wouldn't say benefits, but I do want to say benefits, in the sense, you know, my mindset is so driven, and I just don't even know where to begin with that, but my mindset is just so focused, and so I can push myself mentally as well as physically, albeit not too much. And that's meant that I can do some really great challenges. I'm sure we'll discuss that shortly. But in lockdown 1, I take it in the UK, we've done 3 ineffectively. When I talked to my dad about this, he's like, what's lockdown? Because he lives in Florida, and so lockdown's not really a thing. But lockdown 1, I walked 100,000 steps with a friend. So that's walking 2 marathons. Lockdown 2, I ran a marathon, not a huge runner, but just decided to set myself a challenge whilst having no equipment. And lockdown 3, I rented a rower, and I'm just looking at it now. And I rode 50K. So that took 4 hours, 19 minutes. Yeah, so I think leading back to that arthritis and, you know, having this illness that's constantly there, and I probably will have for the duration of my life, has just meant that I have this push in life mentally. It's quite hard to explain, actually.
I think you've explained it well though, Chelsea, through your actions. So maybe you can't quite verbalize how it pushes you to do things that maybe people would assume that you shouldn't or couldn't do. And yet look at you doing these activities that test the body, but obviously test the mind, because anyone that's run a marathon, I'm sure, not something I've been able to do, Chelsea, but people will know that it's a mental test as much as a physical, especially. They talk about the wall, don't they, where you get to a particular point within the run and your body's just saying no. And I think that happens even regardless of what your ability is. So you could run a 3-hour marathon and you hit a wall at some point, or you could run a 5-hour marathon and hit a wall at some point.
Yeah.
And people have to push through that. So for you to utilize the mindset gain from dealing with challenge on a daily basis with your condition into other areas of your life is something that I think people can learn from, regardless of whether they've got the same condition or not.
Yeah, 100%, definitely.
At the start of COVID, you said there you started to have to take a more severe treatment in order to manage your arthritis. You said it was like a mild chemo. Can you share a little bit with that? And we can guide through as much as you want or as little as you want, just based on your experience with that.
Yeah, sure. Wow. So March, I started having this bad flare up again. And it took 2-3 months to kind of make a decision about what route to go. There's, you know, many different medications out there. There's some new, some old. I had steroid injections as well, which I previously have had in both elbows, but I had a rebooster in May, I believe, last year. And that provides instant relief, but is only temporary. So it'll only last about 8 weeks or so. And so you need to kind of opt for a more long-term medication. And so for me, I decided to go on methotrexate, which is a mild form of chemo. I was on it probably about 10 years ago, and I was very reluctant on being back on it this time, because I just knew the side effects really do get you down, as in throwing up. Oh my God, excuse, that's rather disgusting, but throwing up, being sick, just feeling so down and drained. And I just realized that, you know, to save my joints and actually look at the long-term gain, to go on to methotrexate again. And I did, but in injection form, which was a whole new battle, injecting myself on a weekly basis, as opposed to previously I was on a tablet form. But I was informed that the injection side would would reduce the side effects. And I went on the injections, methotrexate, and just really struggled. Sorry, trying to get my words out on this one. It was just quite a sensitive time in my life, and I think 6 months throughout last year it was tough. And predominantly being on that methotrexate, injecting myself, overcoming that barrier, along with being in bed 1 or 2 days a week, as well as trying to manage corporate life, study life. You know, I appreciate things were shut then in terms of gym, etc., but still trying to exercise and things like that, it just was tough.
One of the most challenging periods for most people was this lockdown period. And we know we talk about lockdown 1, 2, 3, or whatever, but I think that first one, where it's very much a shock to the system, where everything's shut. But not only that, but you had so much else to juggle at that point. And from afar, it seems like you've had progression during that period. I know you're now managing a team of 7 people within work, and you've progressed your career. You've got 3 exams left to go to get your ACA, if I think I've used that correctly.
ACCA, yeah.
ACCA. Then despite the kind of roadblocks in your path, it seems like it's still been a quote unquote productive year. And I know some people hate the idea of, oh, I used lockdown productively, but you and I are very much of a mind where if you are physically and mentally able to, you should be trying to progress regardless of what's going on outside, kind of drowning out that noise.
Oh, definitely. I think through looking at lockdown 1, there was so many people who turned to me and went, how was lockdown? How was this? And I realized that obviously COVID will be something spoke about for a hell of a long time. And, you know, to turn back to someone and say, I achieved this during lockdown, I did this or whatever, you know, as opposed to just binge watching Netflix. But I'm not complaining. Netflix is good at times. But yeah, I just wanted to achieve something during that time so I can look back and reflect and be like, yeah, pat on the back, you got through this or you did that. And so, yeah, that's why I did these challenges. That's why, the method track stake as well was a big part of the last year. But come out a better side, so can't always complain.
I know. I think people can take something from that, and even if it is the short-term motivation that somebody stood up to challenge, like I say, sometimes I'll seek out that kind of content online to get a boost and apply that to my own circumstance, and it gives you perspective as well. If this person is able to overcome these hurdles, then how can I overcome the either bigger or smaller hurdles in my life that pale in comparison? I know comparison gets a really negative rap on Instagram sometimes, but equally, I can use comparison to motivate me. And I'm sure many of the listeners can use it in the same sense from a positive way. Maybe not like, oh, I wish I looked like him or her, or I wish I had that job or this job, but that person, their circumstances are similar or different to mine in this way. How can I apply myself in a similar vein and achieve my version of success?
Oh, exactly. It's not about comparing aesthetically. It's, you know, how can I use what they use in my life to improve on that, really, is how I view it.
Yeah, that disruption to your life and your energy levels through the kind of the treatment that you've gone through must have been significant on your impact at work. Did you feel you had decent support from your employer during that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, they were fully aware, and I kind of pre-warned them. I guess previously being on it, I knew what was to come to some extent, and just said, you know, they're very laid back and were very supportive, and just meant, you know, possibly working later evenings throughout the remaining part of the week, or possibly just the odd weekend. So
yeah, and I think many employers did step up during the COVID period to be more flexible with staff and support them. And I think we hear a lot about the horror stories online about people being placed in furlough and not having any contact with their employer, kind of uncertainty about impending redundancies and whatnot. Whereas in contrast, there's many times where we kind of all got quite well supported by our employer to know where we stood mentally, physically, financially, but especially when an event like that is occurring during your life, for your employer to stay there probably gives you a reason that you are an advocate for working within the corporate industry, despite this massive Instagram online platform that you've got.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the corporate world. I didn't go to university or anything like that. So I've been in the corporate world for, showing my age here, the past 10 years. But they were very supportive, and I am grateful for that, as I really don't know how I probably would have got through it. Being in bed 1 to 2 days a week was not easy.
Yeah, of course. What is it that makes you want to continue with corporate life rather than maybe pursue the Instagram fame and fortune? For those that don't know, you've got like almost 100,000 followers on Instagram, sponsorship deals with Grenade, which is probably one of the most coveted deals that people who post on online want, and such a brilliant brand to work with. What makes you want to continue in the corporate world?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty with Instagram. You don't control that, you know, engagement, how many people see your post, or, I mean, it's not about the likes and things like that, but it will have an impact on your sponsorships or your business if you're running a business through Instagram. And I think ultimately for me, it's just not having that control. And that is predominantly driven by Instagram, Facebook, etc. And I prefer more control. ultimately.
Yeah, control over your destiny through what you do within your workplace. There must be an element of fulfillment as well, I guess, from what you're doing. Like, I don't think you would continue to work in the kind of the real estate property space and investment if you didn't have an element of fulfillment from what you're doing. Where do you think the fulfillment comes from within your 9-5?
For me, as long as I'm growing in life, I am satisfied and ready to go. So for me at the moment, my main focus is to be chartered. And at the moment, I've just started a new role, which is managing 7 people. It's, leading up a department of 500 people and focusing on the finances throughout the duration of the year and what we've done so far. So I think at the moment, just rolling into that new role at the start of this year, also completing my exams is my next goal. And as long as I'm pushing, like I've already stated, then bring it on. But if I hit some sort of stable part, then that's when I lose interest. So I think that's where the interest has always been.
Yeah, a lot of us talk about a corporate ladder, and I don't think it's created equally. And we're not going to get into like male female dynamics and stuff like that, Chelsea. Don't worry, we won't do that.
But interestingly, I'm on Q1 meetings with all team leads at the moment. I'm the only woman on there, and there's 18 meetings with about 3 to 4 people every single time.
That remains a challenge, doesn't it? And I think something the world
definitely
continue working on. And I think anyone speaking to you would see you as every bit as capable as a male exec of your age. So I think that's why we obviously need to address that kind of thing. But for me, it's not created equal in the sense that you see a lot of people, and I try to bring balance to the podcast with people who maybe have left the corporate world for a role in the fitness industry and they love it and they preach about the virtues of it. I've spoken to people on the podcast who have left the fitness world for other industries as well. And I think that's refreshing to understand. And I think, like any role, whether it's in the fitness industry, in the corporate industry, there has to be something in it that keeps you interested. And
definitely.
You see people say like, oh, I hated my job in corporate. And they maybe worked in a call center where they had minimal authority and autonomy. No wonder they felt understimulated. Whereas if you're kind of working towards something that you have a genuine interest in, maybe some of the numbers that you're seeing, Chelsea, stimulate you, getting to look after 6-7 people and have conversations with them and direct their workflow for the day and come together as a team in an organization and feel like a cog that matters. Yeah. That's more important to me than maybe when somebody equally on the opposite side of things is maybe in the fitness industry and kind of feels like they're not having an impact because they maybe coach 4 or 5 people a day in the same type of session and it doesn't fulfill them. No wonder both people in both camps are kind of like, maybe this isn't for me.
There's pros and cons to starting your own business, but also being in the corporate world. For me, working alongside people that you like and generally get along with, I mean, you're sitting alongside them for 40 odd hours a week. So as long as you're happy and fulfilled within that, I think is a key driver. And that possibly might be the reason why people tend to start their own business, ultimately, obviously with control of salary, etc. But it can get quite lonely in that sense, starting your own business. So pros and cons to both sides for sure.
Maybe an area that's forgotten about, like you say, that connection piece. And I've got friends that are online fitness coaches and they join like a business coaching group and have a business coach in order to connect with people that are in the same space, working online, maybe in a particular income bracket, trying to take it to the next one. And that's their level of connection. Whereas I suppose our level of connection is in normal times, or even in these times, we have joint Zoom calls with our teams. We have chats with them. We have a shared purpose and a goal that we work towards. And I think that's maybe an under kind of thought about area of corporate that you and I are clearly getting a benefit from.
Yeah, definitely. I've been at my company for 6-7 years now. I did leave a year to go traveling, but they wanted me back. So I went back to the exact same desk and exact same team. So yeah, that was really, really nice actually.
I love that. When it comes to time management, this is something that interests me. How do you try to fit it in? I know you've said you love your spreadsheets and your numbers. Are you quite regimented with a diary? How do you plan it all?
I get asked this question a lot and I'm like, I don't know. Same 24 hours a day everyone gets. And I seem to somehow jam pack. But no, I guess ultimately it is planning. I do plan posts and things like that, and have them drafted in my inbox, in Instagram within the app, so I can just go in and post. And it's just about managing your time effectively and resourcing that time, and not just, starting this, doing a bit of that. It's really like head down, focus, smash that out, move on. And I guess it is just focusing on that, and on long walks, etc. It's like listening to podcasts and always growing, or just combining different things within your life.
So there's not a lot of dead time for you from what I see. I guess similar to myself, I'm not really up to date on all the latest Netflix series. When people ask me, and I guess I'm more likely to be up to date with the latest podcast. Like you say, I've maybe listened to something, or I've typed a post on my walk into my notes on my phone that I'm going to share later on.
Yeah.
How do you spend downtime, or do you find that your downtime becomes content creation time?
Oh no, definitely. I think through being on Instagram for the past, I think I started it 6 years ago. I've certainly learned that Instagram's no longer my downtime, and I think that's a key issue for people. Switching off from, say, work, you're scrolling on Instagram and things like that, you're not mentally switching off. So for me, it's actually escaping a screen, whether it be a TV, a laptop, or a phone, and just going for a walk or going to the gym. For me, coffee walks have been a huge thing during lockdown. And I do watch Netflix. That certainly has picked up during lockdown. I guess it's just having more time now, not having to commute to an office, etc. But yeah, for me, it is just switching off completely mentally, as well as looking at a screen.
Yes, screens always a big thing, and I've been trying to battle my screen time for a long time now, and I find that moving a lot of things that you would maybe do on your phone for Instagram onto your laptop, so DMs, for example, has helped me tremendously. Obviously, you can't voice note back, which is something I do like to do to people that get in touch, but I can type maybe longer messages, and then I'm not tempted to go onto Insta stories and start viewing them, because I think that's the black hole of attention on the app, isn't it?
You can get into a definite hole through the Instagram stories, that's for sure.
So I guess one of the things that you and I have laughed about before is that somebody, and maybe multiple people, have called you lucky, Chelsea, when it comes to your Instagram platform. That's something that bristles with you, isn't it?
Oh, it touches a nerve massively. I guess just to elaborate on that, people often say, oh, you're so lucky to be, working with great brands, or, to have such a successful platform, etc. But for me, that just frustrates the hell out of me, because for people who don't know what goes on behind the scene of, creating so much content, videoing, recording things, like writing captions, etc. It's all takes up so much time. And I think a big driver for people who are starting a fitness platform today would be consistency. I've been doing this for 6 years, and back when I was the 7 a.m. daily health tip, that meant posting on a daily basis, having something to post, something to write about, or whatever. To do that for such a long duration of time, I think it's just not luck. The Instagram gods didn't wake up one day and say, Chelsea is going to get 92,000 followers, and that is the day. It didn't come like that. I wish it did. That'd be great. But anyway, sorry, going off a tangent. But I think it's just not luck, and it's just frustration, that's all, because there is a lot of work that's put behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think if you look at even like you would call basic workout videos that you post now from your living room during this period where you've had the rower and some body weight, and you've started to get a barbell just before the gyms reopened down south. There's a lot of work that goes into making that presentable, with the captions on what movement you're doing, how many reps you're doing, all that kind of stuff. And to show up and consistently do that for such a long period, and like you say, when you were the 7 a.m. daily tip, that meant 7 grid posts a week at 7 a.m. or 5, whatever it was, depending if you were doing weekends.
It was every day. Yeah.
It was every day. I've no doubt it was. Yeah. And that discipline short term and consistency equals freedom longer term, where now you can kind of show up a little bit more without any pressure on your growth, because you're at a level where your engagement is always going to be solid enough. I know we tear our hair out of the algorithm and the standard of it and whatnot, but ultimately you've showed up for such a long period of time. You've earned the right. Your followers trust you implicitly with what you come onto the feed and say to them, because you've earned that right, so to speak. And it's not luck, it's more the foundations were laid such a long time ago.
Yeah. And I guess being slightly fortunate in the sense that there are so many fitness platforms out there, especially at the moment. And given 6 years ago was quite a while ago, there was not quite as many fitness pages back then. But yeah, it's definitely consistency and building that foundation. And that's why at the moment, I know my life is absolutely manic in terms of working full time, but also studying full time. If I can get that qualification, I will get that qualification whenever that will be. That's just laying that platform for later on in life. So yeah,
it's really funny you look at it in the same way though, and I certainly can see it from my perspective. I think we're quite like-minded in that respect, that doing the work now by getting your accounting qualification is the same as when you were showing up daily on Instagram, because it's giving you something that you can not fall back on but rely upon to some extent. Yeah. When it comes to, well, in your career, it's going to be financially or access to other jobs or promotions within your firm. And equally, your Instagram is something you can fall back on. So at the moment, you might be in almost a maintenance phase of Instagram where you turn up 2-3 days a week on the grid, but you've earned the right to do that because you did the 7 days back in the day. And equally, in 10 years' time, you don't have to sit another accounting qualification unless you maybe go into a different area to specialize, because you've got your paper from back in the day.
Yeah, definitely. One day I'll pass and I'll get there. It's for sure.
Three exams to go. I've got complete faith. Another area of consistency in your life, I guess, I know we've delved into arthritis quite a lot, but are there areas that you need to be consistent in other areas of life in order to manage this to its kind of most manageable, I think, if that's the term?
What do you mean by that exactly?
So what other things do you need to look after? You spoke about the last thing you want to do is movement, but sometimes you need to go for non-weight bearing exercises to manage your arthritis. Are there any other areas you need to keep a focus on, maybe like recovery, sleep, nutrition? What else needs to be consistent to feel at your best?
So for those who don't know, arthritis, the arthritis that I have is juvenile arthritis, and that's partly because I was diagnosed at so young. And effectively, it's similar to rheumatoid arthritis, and that is where my immune system will attack my joints. And if anyone knows, an autoimmune disease, as soon as your immune system has been affected, whether it be through stress, through tiredness, through whatever the case may be, your joints will start to flare up and the arthritis will become active. So for me, I always think sleep is so important, and that is linked back to your immune system and things like that. In terms of food and things like that, I've not found anything specific to actually help. I've heard dairy and taking that out of your diary, but just take that out of your diary. Dairy and diary, same thing. No, taking that out of your diet. Let's say that again. I've heard is meant to work, but for me, I've kept that in, and so far I have kept my condition sort of under control. It's one of those things though that whenever I get a bad flare up, I always go from 0% to 100% in the sense that I just want to be better now, and so I try every little thing possible, whether it be just having more baths frequently in the morning just to get moving and get those joints moving, especially in the morning after sleeping for whatever hours. Drinking more water, taking turmeric, I've found has helped, cod liver oil, tablets and vitamins. Just take everything at once. And because of that, I'm really frustrated that I don't know exactly what it is. But because it's an immune system illness, there's so many different things that could impact that. But for me, I've certainly found sleep is a huge thing. And if I get enough, I mean, one, I'm moody as anything anyway, but two, I've noticed that, joints start to flare up and things like that. So that's just one big key area that I have noticed.
Yeah, I think sleep's foundational for so many things, and I'm glad that you've raised that as one area. You called out some supplements there as well, and equally, I know it's hard for you to gauge whether one in particular supplement is the most beneficial, but you said turmeric, for example, is something you've looked at, and I know it's an anti-inflammatory effectively, isn't it, for joint pain? And I used turmeric when I was at the depths of my last photo shoot prep, and when I get very lean, I don't appear to generate a lot of fluid in my knees, and they get really sore leg pressing and squatting. So for whatever reason, turmeric seemed to help that, and that was the only thing that added in terms of additional supplements. So sometimes, whether it was placebo or not, it seemed to work. And it's interesting you've called that out as well for something that's a bit more serious than some knee pain, because I'm quite ripped.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not a nutritionist, and not sure I could give that information, but that's something I have certainly researched into and looked into, and I do still take tablets, vitamins for turmeric every single day, whether that's had an impact, but like I said, at the moment I'm feeling good, so whatever I'm doing, I'm maintaining for sure.
Let's keep that vibe going and that consistency
definitely
going that way. And I guess we've spoken about your Instagram growth, and one of the areas I want to delve into was that you very much were a niche account, because you said you differentiated by being the 7 a.m. daily health tip. Why do you think that enabled you to grow more so than if you'd showed up initially as Chelsea Fitness?
I think because there's such a huge platform in terms of fitness pages at the moment, it's about getting you across, your personality, your uniqueness, etc. And ultimately, if you are building a platform that people to sell to people, people buy to people, but people buy into people. Let's say that again. And so ultimately is getting you across what makes you unique. Why do people want to buy into you as opposed to someone else who's selling pretty much the same program? Say, for example, if it's a fitness thing you're selling. And so the 7 a.m. daily health tip, it was me. It was 7 a.m. every single day. People knew, wake up in the morning, or people often do check their phones first thing in the morning, and they would see this post, whether it would be mindset driven health tip or something in relation to, exercise, or just a motivational tip, whatever the case may be. People would wake up to that and see that post and go from there. And then it got to a stage where I think it was a couple of years ago where I did change it to Chelsea_Fitness UK and just used it more so for my name. And I guess the main reason for that was because I was traveling at the time with an ex-partner over a year. And yeah, let's just say with the time differences and stuff like that, it just confused the hell out of me. And 7 a.m. was just, no longer 7 a.m. where I was. So it just kind of took a back seat.
Yeah, that makes sense. And equally, it falls back into that point where we're saying about earning the right to do what you want to with a platform once you get to a certain stage, and being able to have that change. I think the last thing I'd really like to cover with you, Chelsea, is you've done these 3 massive challenges in the last year. You've done walking 2 marathons in a day. You ran a marathon. You rode 50 kilometers, was it?
50, yeah.
50, yeah.
Numbest fun ever. But yeah,
yeah, and you broke the rower as well, but you're not telling your audience that, are you?
No.
We'll move on. What is coming next? Because the gyms in England are back open. Is there another challenge in sight, or are you just happy to be back in the weights room?
There'll certainly be some challenges to come. Not exactly sure what just yet. It will be a cycling one for sure, as I feel rowing and running and walking is things that I've ticked off. But for the moment, it's just trying maintaining and getting used to weightlifting again, as during lockdown we were unable to do that. So just slowly easing myself back in, but certainly my brain is ticking away, like, what can I do? The ski erg staring at me. Can I do like a marathon on that maybe? Or I don't know. Can you imagine that motion of just staring at the floor for God knows how long? I don't know. We'll see. There's always something that I want to grow into and build myself up to. Yeah.
No doubt. So I'm going to ask the audience if you've got any suggestions for what you would like Chelsea to do.
Send them in.
Our 4th challenge, then you need to ping them across. If it involves the ski erg, I feel sorry for you. I'd never used a ski erg until 2020, because the garage gym that I've been using has a ski erg in it, and we've been doing like as part of an EMOM, so maybe 12 or 15 calories rest and then going to the next one, or we throw it in as like maybe while I do a circuit with goblet squats, Romanians and lunges, the other person has to do the ski erg the whole time. So we've done some horrible stuff on it. And it's one of those things that you can just bang stuff out because you're using your body weight to just take you down continually and get you moving forward. But I can only imagine if you were doing distances like a marathon on it, what your body's going to feel like after that.
Listen, I love pushing myself to that mental state that we've already talked about. It's not that physical push, it's that mental push. So we'll see what's to come. That's for sure. And I'm just really odd. I love burpees. I love the ski erg. So it's interesting you say you don't like the ski erg. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't not like it, but I can certainly see that it would cause some significant challenges if you were doing a long distance on it. But I'm sure you'll rock it, Chelsea. I've loved this conversation. I'm sure the listeners have as well. If they wanted to reach out and maybe suggest a challenge or just ask you some questions in general, where should they head towards, Chelsea?
For social media, predominantly just use Instagram, so that'd be Chelsea_Fitness UK. I have been on Twitter as well, Chelsea_Fitness UK. I'm laughing because Chelsea didn't fit the character limit, so it's just Chelsea on Twitter. But Chelsea_Fitness UK on Instagram.
That'll
Any
be
challenges, please welcome over.
Yes, my audience will bring you the challenges, Chelsea. Don't worry. I'll link that in the show notes below. I hope you've all enjoyed this conversation as much as I have having it. If you have done and you're on Apple Podcasts, hit the 5-star review. It helps us chart and reach more and more like-minded people. Equally, if you're not on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot, pop it in your Instagram story, tag me at call.cambro, tag Chelsea. Let us know what you think. Let us know what challenges you want to see. And I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.